Well, you know what? I may as well launch right into this whole thing regarding Egypt tonight. So, we've got essentially a what I believe to be a revolution in the making. The official U.S. response to all of this, and from what I can gather, Hillary Clinton being the face of that official response, is basically a non-response. And pretty much, and even though, it's sort of even-handed on the surface, it in no way, accuses the government of Egypt, namely Mubarak, who has been in power for 30 years, of any wrongdoing whatsoever. As a matter of fact, Hillary Clinton and others, other official sources in the State Department, have basically declared that, look, we're going to try to stay neutral in this whole situation, and we support the aspirations of the Egyptian people. But on the other hand, Egypt has been a strong ally of the United States, and so on, So, essentially, they even went so far now as to take off this little underhanded threat of curtailing our military support, which, by the way, is we are the second largest supporter of the Egyptian military and their military machinations in the Middle East. That goes without saying. All that foreign aid that goes to both Israel and Egypt. The situation, as far as I can make it out, and I'm not. Nobody could claim we are experts on the situation. All I can tell you is, that I've followed American foreign policy for quite some time, and this hasn't just been within the last 5 years or since Bush came to power. It goes way back. And so obviously, yes, the Western elites are finding themselves in a conundrum of their own making in that region. And as far as, all these platitudes are concerned regarding the aspirations, the democratic aspirations of the Egyptian people or elsewhere in the Arab world, basically that's just lip service. In essence, the interests of the United States and some other Western powers are not exactly going in the direction of having the aspirations of these people in the Arab world actually realized. And that is why our governments have supported dictatorships in that region all along. Because the ultimate objective in that region is about energy resources at all costs. For the United States to now proclaim that it is interested in human rights in the region is essentially a joke. The United States, in particular, has never supported human rights throughout that region. In fact, it has suppressed them by basically supporting dictatorial governments as long as those governments served U.S. interests. Not even the interests of the U.S. population, I might add. That's besides the point. But the interests of the financial elites who are running the show over here as well as over there. There was a very interesting article over on Global Research, which is a Canadian site, which is very, very insightful, and I'm going to comment on that later. But, you know, essentially what it boils down to is this. The United States actually did not exactly see this kind of an uprising coming. They kept it on the back burner, you know. Brzezinski was actually the one who was attuned to it many years ago, and he warned about it. And he warned about it not in a positive way, but essentially in a threatening way, saying that if, you know, the masses in the Middle East ever rise up and overthrow their dictatorial governments, then we're going to be in a hell of a lot of a mess. And, you know, I believe that we're seeing the beginnings of this happening now. What's going on in Tunisia, and especially in Egypt, is in a sense, you know, fundamentally different from what was happening in Iran during the uprisings there, as you might remember, you know, 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, the Green Revolution, so to speak, which was fully supported by the elites in U.S. government, the CIA, and the rest of it. That is because they believe it is in their interest to overthrow the Iranian regime at all costs. The situation in Egypt is much different. In essence, the United States, as well as some European nations, have fully supported the dictatorship of Mubarak. So they did not support any opposition movement in that country. And it also helps to know a bit of geography in that region, and that is, you know, Egypt is a very large country with a very large population, much larger than Tunisia, by the way. You know, you've got, I think it's 65 million people in Egypt. Not only that, but Egypt, as well as Iran, of course, is strategically located in terms of the Suez Canal, and all that oil which is needed by Western society has to flow essentially through that channel. But no, the United States establishment never supported the opposition in Egypt. They did support the opposition in Iran. And so there is a kind of fundamental difference there. You know, and I can see the hesitation on parts of many of my listeners saying that, you know, look, isn't this whole destabilization project, isn't this basically the neocon dream of what is happening in the Middle East? To which I have to say, well, yes, to some degree actually it is. But it is not the kind of dream that they can control. It is going in a direction which, they do not like. And which obviously they are going to try to control from this point on. So whether this overall revolution in Egypt eventually succeeds in bringing about a more democratic regime, or we shouldn't even say regime, but a government into power, that's still a big question. But I am totally in support of the Egyptian people who want a government which is responsible to their needs. Just as I am for the same thing here. So in some sense we may be seeing, as I'm going to point in this article that I'm going to refer to, a very fundamental shift. I'm not sure whether to call it a global revolution, it's nowhere near that, but yes, a fundamental shift is happening, and the global economic crisis, which is happening as we speak, is very much contributing to that. Anyway, thanks for listening and spending the time. Good night.